Hello, dear YouTube Sangha. Today I would like to discuss something I would call men's issues in relation to relationships. As a Buddhist, it is actually pretty straightforward as to how we should approach having a relationship. Okay, first of all, in today's society, there's no end to what I've been hearing about these days as far as men having unsuccessful relationships, men seeking women and not being able to find love and happiness, and very similar issues. Of course, we know we all are privy to what has been called the incel sort of boom or incel trend, but also just everyday life for even people in relationships. Men are constantly seeking approval of women, and let's just say I'm speaking mostly about the heterosexual approach, but also just any form of codependency. Seems to be a major blind spot for men in general, or people of the masculine end of the gender spectrum. Um, like, I'm sure, people of the feminine side also have to deal with that, but I think that the sort of memes and the cultural upbringing of the male side of the spectrum is very difficult in today's society. I mean, there has been a lot of sort of uptick and uh, growth in the way of feminism, and also just sheer misandry, or the like an outlook of men that is not redeeming. But I mean, it's kind of, if you ever do gender studies and you look into the sort of things that men get up to within their relationships, such as abuse and worse conduct than that, then yeah, it seems to be inevitable that someone might harbor a little bit of suspicion, if not aggression, towards the male side of the spectrum. But I just want to talk about things in a more so-called traditional direction, where we're talking about courtship and stages of a man's relationship and things of that nature. I think that this is important because I lead a men's group at my temple, and it's just something that I feel like I can preface and discuss with my friends and my mentees, people that I mentor there. Um, Basically, this seems to be an issue that I feel does require a lot of mentorship. And when it comes to Buddhism, there's a lot of very sound, trappings of advice. There's just a lot of things that we can glean from Buddhism that lead us to a better and more wholesome way of life, as opposed to being at the weather of relationships. You know, one thing I would like to say as a Buddhist, and just straightforward, just being just as direct as I can, not beating around the bush. As Buddhists, we don't seek relationships for the sake of seeking them. That's just plain and simple. Now, what we should do is, if we are interested in having a relationship with someone, a significant other, we have to not have the cart before the horse. We have to have a mind of non-assuming, where we're not going to seek a deeper relationship with someone just for the sake of the rewards we might find there. Kind of like, you know, don't go digging just for the sake of treasure. You know, sometimes what you find down there isn't what you were hoping for. Instead, we must find joy in the digging. So if we're going to use that metaphor, what I mean is that um, we may search for treasure our entire lives and never find it, and that treasure being like true love or an intimate relationship with someone. But we do enough digging, we find something that we find might satisfy us. But, in the Buddhist context, when we talk about dukkha, or dissatisfaction, or deficiency, that quality is in everything. So, um, rather than, just seeing value in that facile uh, moment of achieving, finding that treasure and discovery of that treasure, and rather than finding bliss there and happiness there, in Buddhism we find it in the action and in the process of digging. Within Buddhism, like if we're not monastics and we do find treasure, then it's like something that we want to value for what it is and not for what it isn't. Now, okay, so the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh had stated before that true love is found not in our image or our imagination of someone, not in like, when you have like this romance sort of honeymoon period with people, um, you start to, you find that you're finishing each other's sandwiches, Frozen reference. All right, you're finding that that everything, you like everything about them, but you're only paying attention to what is positive. We have a bias for this, it's well studied. We know that it has to do with certain chemicals, hormones, pheromones that, trigger our dopamine processes in our brain. We actually get infatuated with people, and it clouds our judgment. And so, the Buddha had spoken pretty directly about this, that, we don't seek affection from others simply for gain, um, for the sake of, that it makes us feel good. That's only a moment in time, and seeking a relationship with someone over like a moment in time is not going to lead to a lasting relationship that would span, a few years or even decades for the rest of your life, which is what a lot of people want to do when they're seeking a relationship. But in the Piyavaga of the Dhammapada, Piyavaga means like a discourse on affection. The Buddha basically um, makes it clear that, like, don't seek affection from the loved or the unloved for its own sake, because that will bring suffering. You know, so just point blank, um, the endeavor, to seek affection from someone will, as the Buddha says, will inevitably cause suffering. But the thing is that, will we be at one with that suffering? Will we accept it for what it is? Will we be able to invoke the tenets of upekkha, which means equanimity? That's really where we find true love. And true love, as Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh says, has the four qualities known as the Brahma Viharas, or the abodes of Brahma. And that means, the first one that traditionally always listed is metta, loving kindness. If we don't have that for everyone, like basically if we don't cultivate loving kindness just in general in our everyday lives, not just within a relationship, but for even ourselves and our own sake, then we're not totally ready to share that with others. So loving kindness is something that we cultivate, or something called metta bhavana, which means you cultivate metta. You're cultivating loving kindness. And in the Buddhist tradition, that is a practice that the Buddha had prescribed to all monks, especially when we're having difficulty, um, coming to see eye to eye with people, and seeing them for who they are. So then there's karuna, which is compassion. Compassion, again, starts with self-love, self-compassion, forgiving the self of what it has done. And so that means not in karuna in this case, and I'm telling all my mentees and all my male pupils here that This also entails not feeling sorry for yourself, not having self pity, because that stuff is essentially like when we talk about Mara and whatnot. That's Mara wreaking havoc of your mind and your wholesome mental state. Do not feel self pity. The moment that you see that, like that seed growing, we need to replace that peg, meaning we need to uproot that or address it immediately and try to find something like an affirmation, an affirmative mindset that will put us back on track. Um, those moments of doubt should only be just a blip, not long, protracted mind states. So if that is what's happening, that is an area where we need to focus and commit to making a change. Self-pity has no place in Buddhist practice at all. In Pali, the word for self-pity is atunya. And, again, it's been brought up quite a bit in the Pali Canon. Just, if just look it up. But karuna, or compassion, that starts with loving the self. What it entails is finding, the strength and the soundness of forgiving the self and others for being imperfect. In Buddhism, there's the three marks of existence. Dukkha, which is dissatisfaction, deficiency. That nothing is perfect. And there's anicca, which means impermanence, that things will never be the same, nor can we expect things to stay the same. And that's for good or bad. Whether we're living a bad experience, just think about it. Eventually it will be over, right? And, if you're having a good experience, that also comes to an end. And not coming to grips with that causes suffering. And it causes unwholesome reactions and mind states. And thirdly is non-self. What the Buddha meant by that was that there's no permanent, everlasting self that's consistently the same, regardless of like what is being introduced to it. So that's something that was popular in Brahmanic tradition, to say that the self was everlasting and eternal, and unchanging, to have the qualities of a god. And the Buddha was like, no, that's not really accurate. If we even look at like the depictions of the gods in the Vedas, or the god of Abraham, we would see that there's actually a change. There's a lot of different personality types there, that change throughout time. So thus the Buddha was like, we cannot point to any singular self that is everlasting, that learns nothing. That's another aspect of that if the self was truly everlasting and eternal, then how is it that it comes to learn things and forget things? And so again, that is anchored towards knowledge. But knowing those things deeply teaches us to have compassion, that no one is perfect, no one is always going to be their self. And we can even just put it into pragmatic terms, that like you fall in love with someone and then you grow old together, and then they get like Alzheimer's or some form of dementia, and then the self fades away. So these things prepare us for maturity, for being wiser to life. And when we're wiser to life, when we have that panya or prajna, which means wisdom, through our experiences and meditation and through calm, then we start to be able to address life's challenges and obstacles without being in distress. So then there is, after that is mudita, which is sympathetic joy. To love someone means to not be jealous or envious of when something goes right for them. We're not in a competition with our counterparts. So if there is a sense of doubt in someone, usually it has to do with the four conceits. Conceits being like just in this sense, we're not talking about like you're being arrogant, not necessarily, but what we're talking about is viewing people. A conceit is when you view others in a different way or in a way that isn't wholesome, in a way that is assuming or presumptuous. Now, for example, the four conceits, excuse me, are that one feels that they are different from another, like fundamentally. That one is the same as another fundamentally. That one is superior to another, and one is inferior to another. Those four things are incorrect. And what we mean by that is that the Buddha had a more like holistic view of a person's lifespan. Um, like we're not always going to be in a state where we're, for lack of a better phrasing, better than other people or in a better position than other people. Are that's not always going to be the case. And by that also it just means that the term better is also relative, like better how, better where. Um, if we're being truly fair and objective, that's never really an observation we can make, or worse or inferior to someone. Also, not, especially when we believe in something like, you know, um, mahakaruna, which means great compassion. We as Buddhists, um, essentially, when we cultivate great compassion, this idea, the conceits basically have no place in our minds. Finally, there's upekkha, which I touched on earlier. But again, what that means is equanimity, balance, understanding the impermanence of the good and the bad. We often go through bad times, and it just sucks. I'm sorry to say, but it's miserable. And when we're in misery, we just suffer, right? But equanimity it doesn't just mean like we're gonna have those moments and just be totally placid. I think that the Buddha was more realistic about it. I think he was just saying that we just endure it and we keep our mind on the times that things weren't so terrible and the times that the ways that it could be worse, but also how those moments in time are impermanent, even if it were to be through the whole rest of your life. Whether that would be within days or years. Um, if we truly have the quality of upekkha, equanimity, then we could endure um, that hardship. Think of people who've been to prison for crimes they didn't commit, and we find out later that they never committed those crimes, and then it's like then they get exonerated or through evidence are found not guilty and released into the real world again. And think about the tremendous amount of equanimity that would have taken to get through all that time incarcerated. It's crazy, right? But what it means in relationships now is that we understand that people have their times, they have their seasons of great elation or joy, and their seasons and times of just dread and maybe even despair. And it's just very important to remember that those things are impermanent, and if there was some connection, some treasure found there in that relationship, then that's the thing we should focus on. Not like, not the dirt or the imperfection that we found later. There's always going to be imperfections, and that's the honest truth. Humans are actually some of the most fallible, let's say, I mean, humans are not objects, but let's just say, in the sake of philosophy, um, just cold, hard philosophy, humans are some of the most imperfect objects or animated things. And so, what do we do with that? Well, we have to cultivate a wholesome mind that is resilient to all this, all the hardship, all the problems. You know, not to say that we can't express hurt, express suffering. No, to the contrary, I think that sometimes we should be able to, especially to confidants. But let's also be mindful and think about whether a significant other is capable of enduring that at the time, you know? And maybe they might even consent to it, but we have to really read the air, be mindful, listen even to like the subtleties of someone's voice, watch their mannerisms. These are things, that take mindfulness and a lot of practice. But always remember, and I feel like this should be the last point, always remember that we should not seek approval from anyone. So even if we are, entangled with someone in a lasting relationship, and we should never let that person's opinion of us determine our compassion for ourselves. We should never allow that to guide us toward any direction other than just seeking self-improvement and self-actualization, because that's the thing that actually works when like a relationship's in trouble, in turmoil. The thing that works is just being sort of stalwart, balanced, and just a good listener, and bearing through a lot of the hardship and a lot of like maybe like the things that people say that might be your pet peeve. Well, maybe it's time to let go of those pet peeves, because like pet peeves in themselves are a construct. If you really think about it, like a noise that it bothers you, or a gesture, the way that someone looks at you, that stuff is conditioned from um, stuff that we're picking and choosing about ourselves. Our ego likes to pick and choose the things that we like about people, and then project that onto other people and say like, well, this person has that quality or doesn't have that quality. They have the quality that I love, they don't have the quality that I hate. And then all of a sudden they start to exude that quality that you hate, or you decided at one point that you hated it and it was abrasive to you. Well, I have to say, tough. If we're going into these relationships, we have to go in always with a beginner's mind. We're always learning about the other person. We're always learning about other people in general. And that's kind of like one of the things that people always say to me. uh you know Dharma Peace, you always seem to want to know about people, like what motivates them, or you talk about cultural things, or you know uh what people think and how they think. And I'm like, yeah, I take that as a compliment, because I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to practice deep listening and mindfulness and compassion, in a deeper sense than just the superficial stuff that you hear about and read about in books. um, that is, to me, what the seed of prajna looks like. And I feel like that's what Avalokiteshvara would do in the sense of Buddhist practice, and just the archetypal Buddhism and bodhisattvas. Well, anyway, my YouTube sangha, this one's longer than the previous video I posted. If you got something out of this and you liked it, please give me a comment, please subscribe. If you got this far, sadhu 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 to you.